Hello all, and welcome to Explained with Dylan. About half an hour from when this video should be getting released, I released part 1 of this video. Saudi Arabia's plans to strive without oil in the future. And it got a bit long, so I decided to cut it short and make it a 2-part video. So this is part 2, talking more in depth about Saudi Arabia this time and less about Dubai. Another thing I do have to give kudos to Saudi Arabia for is that they too are relaxing their religious laws, which is surprising given the fact that they are known as arguably the most religiously strict country in the world. But that has changed significantly in the past couple of years. For example, women now do not have to leave the house accompanied by another man. They can leave alone. And also, there are no, technically, restrictions on how you dress in Saudi Arabia anymore. Now, for the Muslim religion, then yes, you have to dress in a certain way. But any tourist can walk in wearing what I'm wearing right now, and they would be just fine. They aren't technically committing any crimes. There are a lot more things that have happened in the women's rights sector. They've given them not quite equal rights to men, but they're getting there, which is quite a lot for Saudi Arabia, because as I've mentioned a couple of times in the last video, 10 years ago, this was unthinkable. Women had very little rights back then, but now they are starting to get closer and closer to equal rights to men in Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is trying to push out the image worldwide that they are a better country now. They're no longer the country that's going to go kill a journalist because they say something bad about the regime, which they kind of did a couple years back. And you gotta say, it's a bit suspicious. All the progress they'd worked towards, and then they go and kill a reporter. No proof, but let's face it, they definitely killed him, who just spoke out slightly against the Saudi regime. That is not a very good thing. So they're clearly trying to impress the world. They're trying to show off to the world. But behind the scenes, there's still something there. And that could honestly be what ends up holding Saudi Arabia back in the long term. Because Saudi Arabia cannot handle anyone saying something small, just something slightly off about the regime. Because there are still kings and queens and princes and princesses there. Obviously, they go by different names, but effectively, that's what they are. And if you go back to the French example, 200 years ago, then it doesn't exactly work out for them. And honestly, this could be a very similar situation, because a lot of Saudi Arabia's population is still poor. There's the very, very wealthy people from oil, but after that, there's a big drop-off. Now, the UAE has a semi-democratic regime. I wouldn't call it fully democratic, but people can make independent decisions. But Saudi Arabia, it's still a monarchy. There's no way around it. There's no democracy involved. It is a monarchy in Saudi Arabia. And they are definitely concerned that if enough people come together, they could overthrow that monarchy. So the monarchy is trying to be good enough, but they are worried about journalists going and pushing out the truth about that monarchy and the people revolting. And that could ruin Saudi Arabia for a very, very, very long time if that were to happen to them. So I think the biggest thing that Saudi Arabia needs to do, for starters, stop killing off the journalists, allow more free speech, but also give the people more rights. Do what North America and Europe does. Give every standard person more rights. Women's rights have gotten better, but they're still not top-notch like you'll find in Western Europe and North America and plenty of other countries around the world. I know I always say Western Europe and North America, but there are plenty of other countries, such as Oceania with Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea. There are tons of countries around the world with the same rights and the same laws as North America and Western Europe. I just always say North America and Western Europe, but there are plenty of countries around the world with equal rights. And that's what Saudi Arabia truly needs to do. But another thing is that they need to have a proper minimum wage and standard workers' rights, because they are even worse than the UAE is right now. Their workers are in awful conditions and paid so little. Meanwhile, the government and the millionaires there, the oil barons, are racking up all the money. But they have enough money to pay those people standard living rates, enough to at least get by. And that's what Saudi Arabia truly needs to do. They need to show their proper population that they care about them. They don't just care about the tourism, the money. They care about the population. But I'm not necessarily sure that they do because of how much. They just want to make more money is their biggest goal. They want to make more money from all the Western tourism they're trying to bring in. And they don't care. They don't give a damn about any of their population itself, except the rich people that are going to be racking up more money. But the rest of them, all they see is that people that they can make money off of because they're building everything there. One example would be the Jeddah Tower. It was supposed to be a mile-high tower to compete with the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. It would be the tallest building in the world. They started construction, but then the people kind of ran out of money that were supposed to be building it. And now it's been stalled for the past while. We don't know what's going to happen there. But that is one massive project that we're trying to take on and aren't exactly doing great with. Because they are trying to spend so much money that currently they don't have. And they don't have it proven that people are just going to come just because there's one large tower. I think Saudi Arabia, which is something rare that they would never even think of, but they need to start slightly smaller. They don't think that way because it's oil. They know that they can just go straight up to the top. But if they start a bit smaller, if they just influence tourism a bit more from laws, make their cities nicer overall, maybe make some small hotels, influence some hotel chains to come there and build some nice resorts. And from there, once it's proven that people will come to this version of Saudi Arabia, then you can go bigger. Then you can try and compete with Dubai. Jeddah is a great example. Jeddah is the kind of city that they want to compete with Dubai. It is right on the Red Sea. It's already a fairly large city with a stable population, and it's a fairly wealthy city. So it is the perfect destination for tourism. People would want to go there. That can match up perfectly to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, as long as they do it right, which currently they're doing it sort of all right, but I think there are plenty of things they could improve on, especially if this Saudi regime wants to stay stable. Because if this doesn't go through, then they have to realize that they are not lasting in Saudi Arabia. Because the people are going to get unhappy if they lose all their oil money 10 years, 20 years down the road and don't have anything from tourism. That regime is going to go. And I'm not sure what will take its place, but it's not always starts off the best. It's a long process to get to the better forms of government. And it takes quite a while. So I hope for Saudi Arabia's sake that this can go through, that they can actually please the population, but also become more of a tourist country. Or else, this might not work out very well for them at all. They'll go bankrupt, they'll be losing tons of money, and they'll lose their entire regime. They could even go into civil war. We don't know exactly what will happen, but there would be plenty of unhappy population that don't exactly have the exact same view. Originally, this was only going to be a 2-part video. When I started the video, when I filmed that intro, I had in my head that it was going to be 2 parts. But I am midway through the editing sequence here, and I see that it is 20 minutes. So I am going to cap off the second video here, and part 3 will be along in a couple of minutes.